Okishio's theorem is a theorem formulated by Japanese economist Nobuo Okishio. It has had a major impact on debates about Marx's theory of value. Intuitively, it can be understood as saying that if one capitalist raises his profits by introducing a new technique that cuts his costs, the collective or general rate of profit in society for all capitalists goes up. Okishio establishes this theorem under the assumption that the real wage, the price of the commodity basket which workers consume, remains constant. Thus, the theorem isolates the effect of pure innovation from any consequent changes in the wage. For this reason the theorem, first proposed in 1961, excited great interest and controversy because, according to Okishio, it contradicts Marx's law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. Marx had claimed that the new general rate of profit, after a new technique has spread throughout the branch where it has been introduced, would be lower than before. In modern words, the capitalists would be caught in a rationality trap, a prisoner's dilemma. That which is rational from the point of view of a single capitalist turns out to be irrational for the system as a whole, for the collective of all capitalists. This result was widely understood, including by Marx himself, as establishing that capitalism contained inherent limits to its own success. Okishio's theorem was therefore received in the West as establishing that Marx's proof of this fundamental result was inconsistent. More precisely, the theorem says that the general rate of profit in the economy as a whole will be higher if a new technique of production is introduced in which, at the prices prevailing at the time that the change is introduced, the unit cost of output in one industry is less than the pre-change unit cost. The theorem, as Okishio points out, does not apply to non-basic branches of industry. The proof of the theorem may be most easily understood as an application of the Perrin-Frobenius theorem. This latter theorem comes from a branch of linear algebra known as the theory of non-negative matrices. A good source text for the basic theory is Senyeta. The statement of Okishio's theorem, and the controversies surrounding it, may however be understood intuitively without reference to, or in-depth knowledge of, the Perrin-Frobenius theorem of the general theory of non-negative matrices. Result: Nobuo Okishio proved this generally, which can be interpreted as a refutation of Marx's law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. This proof has also been confirmed, if the model is extended to include not only circulating capital but also fixed capital. Mechanization, defined as increased inputs of machinery per unit of output combined with the same or reduced amount of labor input, necessarily lowers the maximum rate of profit. David Laibman and Okishio's theorem. Between 1999 and 2004, David Laibman, a Marxist economist, published at least 9 pieces dealing with the temporal single system interpretation of Marx's value theory. His The Okishio Theorem and Its Critics was the first published response to the temporalist critique of Okishio's theorem. The theorem was widely thought to have disproved Karl Marx's law of the tendential fall in the rate of profit. But proponents of the TSSI claim that the Okishio theorem is false and that the work refutes it. Laibman argued that the theorem is true and that TSSI research does not refute it. In his lead paper in a symposium carried in Research in Political Economy in 1999, Laibman's key argument was that the falling rate of profit exhibited in Kleeman depended crucially on the paper's assumption that there is fixed capital which lasts forever. Laibman claimed that if there is any depreciation, a premature scrapping of old, less productive fixed capital, productivity will increase, which will cause the temporally determined value rate of profit to rise. This value rate of profit will therefore converge toward Okishio's material rate of profit, and thus this value rate is governed by the material rate of profit. These and other arguments were answered in Alan Freeman and Andrew Clement's lead paper in a second symposium, published the following year in the same journal. In his response, Liebman chose not to defend claims through, instead put forward a temporal value profit rate tracking theorem that he described as proposed that must eventually follow the trend of. The tracking theorem states, in part, if the material rate rises to an asymptote, the value rate either falls to an asymptote, or first falls and then rises to an asymptote permanently below the material rate. Kleeman argues that this statement contradicts claims through, as well as Liebman's characterization of the tracking theorem. If the physical rate of profit rises forever, while the value rate of profit falls forever, the value rate is certainly not following the trend of the physical rate, not even eventually. Quote, in the same paper, Liebman claimed that Okishio's theorem was true, even though the path of the temporally determined value rate of profit can diverge forever from the path of Okishio's material rate of profit. He wrote, if a viable technical change is made, and the real wage rate is constant, the new material rate of profit must be higher than the old one. That is all that Okishio, or Roma, or Foley, or one, or anyone else has ever claimed. Quote, in other words, proponents of the Okishio theorem have always been talking only about how the rate of profit would behave in the imaginary special case in which input and output prices happened for some reason to be equal, never about the real-world rate of profit. Kleeman and Freeman suggested that this statement of Liebman's was simply an effort to absolve the physicalist tradition of error. Okishio's theorem, they argued, has always been understood as a disproof of Marx's law of the tendential fall in the rate of profit, and Marx's law does not pertain to an imaginary special case in which input and output prices happen for some reason to be equal. Quotes, considered abstractly, the rate of profit may remain the same, even though the price of the individual commodity may fall as a result of greater productiveness of labor and a simultaneous increase in the number of this cheaper commodity. The rate of profit could even rise if a rise in the rate of surplus value were accompanied by a substantial reduction in the value of the elements of constant, and particularly of fixed capital. But in reality, as we have seen, the rate of profit will fall in the long run. Karl Marx, Capital 3, Chapter 13. The last sentence is, however, not from Karl Marx but from Friedrich Engels. No capitalist ever voluntarily introduces a new method of production, no matter how much more productive it may be, and how much it may increase the rate of surplus value, so long as it reduces the rate of profit. Yet every such new method of production cheapens the commodities. Hence the capitalist sells them originally above the prices of production, or perhaps above the value. He pockets the difference between their costs of production and the market prices of the same commodities produced at higher costs of production. He can do this because the average labor time required socially for the production of these latter commodities is higher than the labor time required for the new methods of production. His method of production stands above the social average, but competition makes it general and subject to the general law. There follows a fall in the rate of profit, perhaps first in this sphere of production, and eventually it achieves a balance with the rest, which is therefore wholly independent of the will of the capitalist. Marx, Capital, Volume 3, Chapter 15.